Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where we believe that as you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And where we also believe that the more compassion you expose yourself to and hold in your heart, the more compassion will flow out of you and also towards your ability to have compassion for your own self. And that leads to living a life where you're fully self-expressed and delicious to be with. This is what we're diving into today, and I still have so much elation in my chest for the shift and the things that are happening in the podcast. So we're gently moving into season 2, okay? The season 1, we went through my journal when I was 15 and pregnant, and we ended that story with my current, modern day husband and how he came into the picture after my divorce. So season 2 will be short and sweet with a few months of content, all from my husband's perspective, and then seeing how the two stories mesh together. Hopefully you love it. I'm so excited to bring it to you. And really quick before we get started, I just want to wish you well. I want to ask how you're doing, and I wish I was there to listen. I wish I was there to hear the updates and what's going on in your life. Always feel free to reach out, DM me. I love knowing that this podcast is a part of your listening. You know, I heard recently one of I call her my podmate. I call her my podmate from a couple years back. She was a part of a business mastermind that I was a part of for a short period of time. And she recently made a comment and just was like, Mish, I haven't missed an episode yet. And I'm like, Leanne, you're the bomb. So thank you so much for all of you who are following along. Know that I care about you. Know that I really do care about how you're doing. And I know that you're here for the story. I know you're here for the podcast. So let's jump in.
5th grade Scout Journal. My name is Jake Daniel McKittrick. It is February 1989. I am 11 years old and in the 5th grade. I have a new baby brother. I always wanted a brother. My parents let me name him Jordan. I really like Michael Jordan, and he has cool shoes. My scout leader says I have to write in a journal. I don't want to, but I have to if I want to earn things like my Weeblos badge and Arrow of Light. I don't like scouts. Sometimes it is fun, but there are so many checklists, and I don't like that my parents make me do stuff like scouts and piano. I would rather be with my friends. We like to play sports after school at Fiddler's Elementary. My teacher this year is Mr. Thorley. I am lucky because everyone wants him to be their teacher. He is nice to everyone. He was my sister Cassie's teacher too. I am still sad that Joel moved to Las Vegas in November. He was my best friend since we were 4 years old. We used to catch salamanders and ride big wheels and play with his guinea pigs. My dad helped fix his hip and he can run and play again. I used to love his Atari, but now everyone wants a Nintendo, but my parents won't allow it and think it's a waste of time. I went to Heidi DeMille's birthday party. It was fun, but there were so many kids I didn't know. They were from Enoch, where Heidi used to live. It was weird to be around so many girls at a party. I wonder if all of them will be at Cedar Middle School next year. Every morning I watch my older friends get on the bus across the street. They are lucky to already be in middle school. July 1989. We have been playing a lot of slam ball with a small basketball on the short hoops. Colby Daly and Nate Sutherland are the only houses that have them. Greg and Christian are the best, but they are a year older and tall. They keep telling me I will probably have a girlfriend and French kiss someone. That sounds scary. I am excited for 6th grade to combine with all the other schools and make new friends. 6th grade, first week of school. My mom drove me to school on the first day, and I was late. Everyone had to meet in the gym before first period. It was embarrassing to walk in and have everyone looking at me. I could not believe how many kids there were. It looked like hundreds. I couldn't see anybody that I know. I stood by the wall under the basketball hoop with other kids that were late. I wore my Andre Agassi AirTech Challenge shoes and a Quicksilver shirt that had some of the same colors. My other pair of school shoes are white Reeboks. I really like them, but last week I showed Greg all my school clothes and he thinks they are ugly, so I probably won't wear them if other kids think they are not cool. My first period dance class with Mrs. Webster is really fun. I would never tell my friends that. They might make fun of me and think I'm a sissy. It's cool to be able to dance with the girls, but I feel nervous already about the end of the quarter. We have to perform in front of all of our parents. Mandy, Kirsten, and Misha are the cutest girls in the class. I have known Mandy since kindergarten. Kirsten and Misha are from Enoch.
Oh, it's so great to get a glimpse of little Jake, younger Jake. And what else is really cool is that there's so many things that he said about the places that the two of us started crossing paths. So the first one, he was talking about a birthday party that he went to, and Heidi DeMille used to live in my neighborhood, and then she moved into town, quote, into town. And when she moved into town, truthfully, she was really only a couple of miles away, but it took her into a different school, like a different elementary school. And therefore she was surrounded with a bunch of new kids that she didn't know and all of her old friends didn't know. So it was an interesting mix at this birthday party that when we go back in time, Jake was like, oh my word, I was at that birthday party. And I'm like, yes, I was at that birthday party. And Heidi was just one of my greatest friends, when I was in elementary school. And so that's kind of just a really fun memory of like the beginning stages of boys and girls mixing together for both Jake and I, right? So that's like just a really fun memory and kind of line to draw, like, oh yeah, we were both there. That's fun. And you always kind of think, like, I always think these things like, I wish I could go back and just be a fly on the wall and just watch, because regardless if you were around your husband when you were young and you never knew it, or if you were just with, your friends, gosh, it would just be so cool to go back and observe your own self, kind of like without the idea of a camera or like somebody's watching, just to like watch. It's amazing. Anyway, there was another memory that he talked about when the two of us were in this dance class together in the 6th grade. And Mrs. Webster was my dance teacher all through elementary school, but she also taught at the middle school. And so she taught social dance. And I think it's kind of funny that Jake, has this undertone of being a sissy to be able to be in that class. Because for me, I was like in my total element. And I do think that he still really enjoyed that class, but then, like where I'm in looking forward to it as like one of the best parts of my day, just because I love dance so much. Yeah. So reminiscing on a lot of the ways that we were, and, maybe how that's allowing you to also go back in time and to think about the ways that you were, when you were in the 6th grade and different things that happened for you. I think it's interesting that we see the personalities develop at very young ages. It's interesting to go back to some of these stories, and I want to talk about a couple a little bit more in depth of some things that Jake mentions. So the first one is about the story with his friend Joel and how his dad helped his hip. So I want to kind of dive into this because this is a story that has come full circle in our life. And it's a story that stayed with Joel forever. So I just want to touch on it. I think it also shows a lot about the personality development, like I was talking about with Jake, and compassion. So just to give you a little bit more background, Joel's hips had this complication. And I'm probably going to say it wrong, but it's leg calf prosthesis, whatever that is. So he couldn't walk on his hip because of the way that he was growing. And if he would have walked on his hip, it would have hurt him for the rest of his life. Like he wouldn't have been able to heal all the way. So Jake's dad is a chiropractor, and Jake knew in his heart that his dad could help his friend, but he also knew that Joel's family didn't have the means to pay for the treatment. And so he asked his dad if he would fix his friend. And when I've talked to Jake's dad about this incident later on in life, it is like one of the sweetest things ever, because he describes Jake with so much tenderness and feeling, Jake having so much concern and love for his friend. And when he approached his dad and asked this of him, he agreed right away. And so his dad agreed to fix his friend. And for almost an entire year, Jake stuck right by Joel's side. At recess, they did things that Joel could do. They sat in the dirt and played with cars. They did things that accommodated Joel and his inability to walk on his hip. Fast forward in life, as both of these young boys, Joel and Jake, have families, their two youngest children, Tice and Giles, had an incident that sort of was the opposite, but reflected what had happened in Joel and Jake's younger years. So we were at a soccer tournament, and Tice, it was kind of one of his first ones. Okay, he was, I want to say, 7 or 8 years old, and he had worked so hard. I can't remember because there's a term for it, and it's happened to him twice in his life, where his legs like lock up completely, and he cannot walk on his legs. Like they do not work. There's something about like the minerals being stripped or something like that. And he had played a lot of soccer games kind of in a row, and it was just too much for his body based on what he was getting, what he was taking in. And so we, kind of had the moment like, what is going on with him? And we kind of had the, doing the research and, not really freaking out, just really immediately calling Jake's dad and kind of getting advice and figuring out what was going on. And then, making sure that we were giving him coconut water. He sat out the rest of the tournament and feeding him really, really well and, trying to nourish him. And in the meantime, we were staying at Joel's house because we were at a tournament that was out of town. Okay. And so as Tice's legs had locked up and we were carrying Tice from location to location, Giles was like the most loyal friend. He would sit by Tice and say, Tice, if your legs worked, we would be over there on that playground. We would be, and he would just be, Tice, I wish your legs worked. And if they did, he would just be talking to him like that. And instead he sat by him all the time and played magformers, and we carried him out to the trampoline and they played cards on the trampoline. There was just so much sitting and playing and these activities that these boys did that was so impressive, A, because it didn't take coaching Giles for Giles to step into that, and B, because it was an absolute reminder and a reflection of what had happened with Joel and Jake for an entire year. So Tice, this happened for a couple of days. And this is what happened, during an entire year of Joel's house. So it was like a representation of like the most magnificent form of love and compassion that was just so beautiful. And it was, during that time that Joel was recounting that story to me as well. And he just would get completely teary when he shares the story. And it, it's so great to really be loved and to carry that with you throughout all of your life. Jake had no idea at that age that his story would have an impact on Joel for the rest of his life. He wasn't thinking about that, nor did he think that story might make his wife love him even more. He just knew what he felt in his heart. And when we truly love others and when we feel what they feel and we want to help them, that is such an incredible and beautiful manifestation of what compassion is. And so I want to dive in and talk a little bit about compassion, because as I've been pondering it and thinking it, I've been thinking about how we really do develop compassion. And most of the ways that we develop compassion is we see it modeled for us, right? So as I was, contemplating and thinking about this, I saw a video on YouTube that is a video about brain games. And I don't know if you've ever watched brain games or, seen the things that they do on that show, the Brain Game Show. But if you haven't, it's actually super intriguing, and it's great to watch with your family because you can have all kinds of conversations around our brains. It's a beautiful way to first be entertained and then to be able to dive in deeper. So here's the experiment that they shared on Brain Games. The experiment is that they had these different people who were paid to come in and to be able to participate in an experiment. And when they came into the office, there was one person that was on one side of the glass and another person on the other side, with a person who was conducting the experiment that was wearing a white lab coat. Okay, so like portraying authority and so forth. And the glass was like a one-way mirror. So the person on the other side that was alone in the room couldn't see into the room where the other volunteer or person that was hired to do the experiment and the officiator for the experiment was. And what happened is they would go into this room and they would sit down in front of this bowl of chili. And then there was 3 different hot sauces that were lined up. Okay. And one was mild, one was hot, and one was death. And they could see the other person through the glass. And the officiator of the experiment would explain, okay, listen, this person on the other side of the glass, they don't get paid for the experiment unless they eat the entire bowl of chili. So you can choose any of these hot sauces to add to the chili, but you have to choose one and go ahead and add that hot sauce, and then we'll take it into them, and then they have to eat it. Okay? And they didn't have to sit and watch them eat it or anything. And they knew that. It was just choose the hot sauce, and then you're done, and you get paid. Boom. That's it. That's part of the experiment. And so they did that, and the natural human spirit would always reach for the mild and add some of it, and then hand the bowl of chili, and the guy would say like, okay, that's it. And he'd say, yeah, that's it. And then that person who added the hot sauce to the chili would leave, okay, knowing that they would be delivering the bowl of chili to the guy on the other side of the glass. Okay. So then they took the experiment to another level, and they took the person that was on the other side of the glass, and they would make them kind of run into them on their way into the office, and that they were on a cell phone, like kind of really not paying attention at all, would totally bump into them and kind of throw them off, and then turn around and be like, watch where you're going, or like, hey, 2 lanes, buddy, something like that. And just kind of like a little bit of like, enough to develop a little bit of angst inside of them. And then they would go into the room with the experiment and the chili and the person who was officiating, and they would look through the glass, and they would be told the same thing, but the person who sat down in the chair was the person who ran into them out in the lobby. And every time they would choose either death or the really hot sauce. Most of them chose death. And they would add a ton of it to the chili, kind of as like a revenge, and then they would leave. Okay. And then they added a whole nother level. So that happened multiple times with multiple people, and they added that other hot sauce, right? And then the same thing would happen to the participants. They would get run into in the lobby. The other guy was kind of not crazy mean, but just a little bit like entitled to his space and being completely unaware of like other people and respect, right? So it was the same situation where that run-in would happen. They would go into the room. The participant goes into the room with the chili and the instructor or the officiator of the experiment. And the officiator of the experiment would treat the person with kindness from the very beginning that they entered the room, instead of just giving them the instructions. He would say, you have such a great smile, or would you like me to get you some water? How's your day going? And then he would tell them the instructions. The person would sit down in the other side of the chair. They would recognize, oh, that's the guy that ran into me in the lobby. And they would reach for the mild hot sauce. I hope you followed that whole story, because I tried to tell it really well. But the point is that when we are met with compassion, we are more compassionate. Even for people who are oblivious to us, even towards people who are entitled or, fill in the blank. So we gain compassion by being influenced by compassion, either from the people around us, right? The officiator in the room, or we can learn how to develop that compassion from inside of ourselves. Okay? And so I love how the Dalai Lama begins each day. He begins it the same way. And he says, as soon as I wake up, I remember Buddha's teaching the most importance of kindness and compassion, wishing something good for others, or at least to reduce their suffering. Then I remember that everything is interrelated, the teaching of interdependence. So then I set my intention for the day that this day should be meaningful. Meaningful means, if possible, serve and help others. If not possible, at least not to harm them. That's a meaningful day. I just think that that's so gorgeous if we cultivate, right? If we learn to cultivate more compassion in our lives versus just having it being modeled for us and then therefore sparking compassion as we go, as we see it, right? That we have the capability to cultivate more compassion because of what we do inside of our heart. I think that it's interesting that as you look for compassion online and in places, you can see that there's actually like compassion training. I know parents have a desire to instill compassion in their children. That is a trait that we understand is a necessity, not a luxury. That humanity actually needs that. Like we have a need for love and compassion. Mother Teresa reminds us we cannot always do great things on this earth. We can only do small things with great love. And Plato says, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a harder battle. You know, I think that it's interesting when you go back to the experiment and when someone was shown a little bit of compassion as kind of the medium or the in-between event of what happened, that then that person was able to dig deeper into themselves. But what if that person sat in that chair across from them and suddenly you could see a flash of what had got them into the state that they were in, to be able to be acting the way that they were? And if you think about life from that angle, if you think about what Plato really said, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a harder battle. When you really take that perspective shift and you see that you flip the coin and try to see it from their shoes, that's compassion. That's really compassion. And I love Anne Frank saying, no one has ever become poor by giving. So if you go back to the statement that simply we gain compassion by being influenced by compassion, either from ourselves or from others, right? From something around us, then it's really great to be able to see the equation that if you get your heart into sort of like that mushy state, if you're willing to read a story or feel a feeling or put yourself in other people's shoes, or wish goodwill towards them, those are the types of things that can ignite it in your own heart. And compassion ties into what I want to talk about next, and so we'll come back to it. But I want to talk to you about the experience that Jake had when he had gotten all these new school clothes. And obviously he was excited about his school clothes because like he got to pick them out. He was excited. He was pumped up. He even describes like what they were, right? And then he had another friend tell him that they were ugly. And you always think about like, what was the motivation of that friend to take these like really cool school clothes and tell him that they were ugly? Like, was he trying to like put him down so that, who knows, who really knows? Like you can sit and speculate all day long. But I thought that Jake's response was so interesting when he's saying like, I probably won't wear them if other kids think they are not cool. And so that brings up for me ideas about self-expression and how as we go through our life, we have experiences that happen to us that make us feel like we, it's more important for us to fit in than for us to think, speak, and act how we actually feel. In just the evolution of human beings, right? We've had this inherent need to belong. And so sometimes that sense of needing to belong is parallel with the need to survive, and that outweighs our ability to be expressed, right? Our ability to just be who we are. And I think that as, most humans evolve, we all go through a little hiccup or a little period of time, and some not so much, not so in such a crazy way, and some are really, really go through this, like they're a kid, they're completely unaware of, what other people think about them. They're just living and having an awesome life. And then they start to become aware of like their parents thought a certain thing when they did a certain thing, and the way that affects them, and the meaning that they make around it, right? Or, like Jake's example, when he walked into the gym and he got all embarrassed and all of a sudden everyone was looking at him. And then all of a sudden there were these like screaming lights that were like, all I want to do is fit in. All I want to do is like not be made a spectacle in an embarrassing way. And so we go through this period of time where we start to notice that we kind of care what people think about us. And then I think in our adult years, we start to like come out of that, and we kind of have to do sometimes deep therapy to just let go, about what other people think, and to kind of come back into that childlike ability to just be. There's a quote I love by someone that it's unknown. It says, "Today I want you to think about all that you are instead of all that you are not." When we slip into being so worried about what other people think about us, we're more focused on what we're not. We're listening to a more negative spin in our mind about who we are, about our ability to show up. And we start to spin that negative talk. And the sad thing is that sometimes we actually listen to it, right? I remember there was this example of somebody talking about tinnitus. And, that's kind of like when someone gets a ringing in their ear. That's a constant ringing in their ear. And when this happens to people, they say they no longer really even notice that ringing is happening in their ear. And that's kind of like the voice that we have in the back of our head. We've talked about it before as like background music, right? Like what is that voice saying majority of the time? What is the hum that is going on in the background? And a lot of times when we really struggle to be ourselves, that voice is spinning everything negative. Buddha said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire world, deserve your love and affection." And sometimes instead of that, we fall into self-hatred. We fall into feeling like we need to be different than what we are so that the people around us will accept us and love us, or that we can secure a job or a place on the team or something, whatever it is that kind of gets in the way. And so what I really want to kind of get to the bottom of for this podcast episode is that the way that the topic that we talked about just previously, compassion, how when we allow compassion for ourselves in the door, we can completely reverse that negative self-talk. We can reverse the reasons that we have in our head to not be self-expressed. When we cultivate compassion outside of ourselves, it becomes a natural feeling that we have. And when we do that for the people around us, it's easier for us to have it for our own selves. It's easier for us to develop self-compassion. And I love the way that if we just cultivate that outside of us, that almost comes more naturally to us, right? There's so many things. There's a list of things that I can give you to do to be able to help yourself in the area of helping yourself gain more ability to be self-expressed, or ability to have compassion for yourself so that you can then be self-expressed. One of the ones that I think is the most important is being able to rewrite the way that constant ringing is happening inside of our head. And so just becoming aware of that voice, just becoming aware of internal causes of talking to ourselves negatively. Because a lot of times it's actually coming from like that deeper feeling of like I did something wrong, or I'm worried, or I feel alone, or I feel uncertain, I feel lost or scared or hurt. And when you dig underneath the surface and you become aware of that self-talk and you peel back the layers and you find those feelings, so often you can offer compassion to those feelings and those fragile parts of yourselves. And so cultivating and practicing compassion outside of yourself, being able to extend it to yourself. There's an exercise I love so much that when you're kind of finding yourself in that state, of negative self-talk, to actually talk to yourself in third person. Why? Because you're actually sometimes nicer to people outside of yourself than you are to your own self. So much of the time we'll be more critical or judgmental about our own struggles. And you might say like, dang it, Misha, why did you do that? But if I was talking to Sally, I would probably not say, dang it, Sally, why did you do that? I would probably say, hey, Sally, it's okay. We all screw up. Like, we can't all be perfect. It's okay. Like, we'll recover. Or, you've got this. Like, you can totally handle what's coming towards you, right? You talk differently to the people around you sometimes than you naturally talk to your own self. And so when you can talk to yourself in third person and say something like, hey, Mish, we got this. You totally can do this. I've seen you do amazing things before. Let's just rock this. Or, hey, Mish, whatever it is that's kind of like in front of you, if you can talk to yourself in that way using third person, you're generally going to say more kind things with more compassion than you would to other people. And even if you have to say it out loud, right? Even if you have to say it out loud until you get used to that ringing in your ear, the hum in your head, the background music actually shifting. Then you move through life with much greater flow and ease. Then you come into more fully your ability to be self-expressed. And there's a certain okayness that we kind of have to come to within ourselves to really completely be self-expressed. And I'm going to bring up a couple of things, and you'll see that there's like compassion inside of each of these things, because self-expression isn't really about finding the loudest part of you and making sure it's seen and heard. Dyeing your hair pink and letting the whole world see it, or piercing your nose, or that's not really what self-expression is, though it can be, right? Self-expression is simply giving yourself permission to just be you without the thoughts of what others are thinking swaying your actions. It's about speaking up when you want to say something, about wearing things that you want to wear without being concerned if others will like it, right? Like Jake. It's about being able to act how you feel in the moment, right? Because that's how you feel. It's about finding the solidarity under your feet and allowing that knowingness to guide you through your life. And solidarity comes from understanding things like loving and appreciating who you are, right? Developing that inner voice to reflect love and compassion, right? So no matter what you do, solidarity comes from That solid ground underneath your feet comes from understanding things like other people are entitled to their own opinion and carry their own baggage. Like, do you really get that what another person thinks or feels, that it actually says more about them than it does about you? And so Greg needing to say, hey, Jake, those clothes are ugly, it actually says more about him. Maybe he has an insecurity. Maybe he doesn't want Jake to show up looking better than him at school. Maybe whatever, right? It's actually saying more about the other person than it's saying about you. And like, understanding that takes compassion, right? It's also things like, if you alter the way you are for any reason, then whatever reason you did it for is unstable. Okay, so like if you try to be a different person so that you can gain a friendship, that friendship is actually built on rocky ground. Okay, fill in the blank. For whatever way and reason you're not being yourself, that reason that you're doing that for is unstable. So do you see how like understanding that gives you more power in just being who you are? Because you don't want things that are unstable in your life. Finding that solidarity is also things like knowing that you are not perfect and people are not out there tallying your flaws. Think about you. Are you keeping track of everybody else's flaws around you? If you are, maybe we need some more compassion, right? And it's an energy. It's a vibration that if they're carrying that with them through their life. And it's not an energy that you want to be a part of anyway. And so by being yourself, you automatically avoid that. Whatever you are, you attract. And so if you have the need to be perfect, you're going to attract other people in your life that have the need to be perfect. You see? It's really very simple. And when you can get more attached to the clarity behind the reasons why you should just be who you are, it just makes so much more sense. The more that you withhold who you really are, you're not doing yourself any favors. Because the more capable you are of being yourself, the faster you find your people. The more you're able to be who you are in the vibration and energy that you are, the more you're able to attract those same people into your life. If you're showing up as a fake and a fraud, that's a vibration. People are repelled by those vibrations. At least the people that you would probably actually want in your life are repelled by those vibrations. So really, when you let it go, you actually get to attract people in your life faster that just love you for who you are. You naturally also accept other people and allow them to be who they are. It's a much more beautiful exchange. Solidarity also comes from trusting that what is there for you will always be there for you. Okay? Even if you go through a season where you're learning to love your own self before attracting that love from someone else. Sometimes we go through life and the program that's actually running in the back of our mind is that there aren't enough friends and there's not enough people. And what if you don't have enough? What if you don't have the right job or the right, whatever it is that's causing you to fall out of sync with being yourself? And when you understand that it's all there for you, and sometimes we do have to pull back a little bit to kind of get our vibration and our energy right. And when you can fall into step with that trust, you gain more solidarity, more solid ground under your feet. And the last one I have to leave with you that helps you find more solidarity under your feet is just knowing that you are the authority of your own life. And that if there's something about you that you don't like, it's only information. Because you have the capability to either change it or accept it. And your freedom in doing this straight up gives you the key to live your life however you feel is very best for you. And notice what that would require. Compassion. Compassion. And so we come full circle, right? We come full circle in seeing that compassion and self-expression are so beautifully interconnected, and that self-compassion is also generated when we have compassion for the people around us. Thomas Cizaz says something that I'm not so sure I'm 100% on board with, so I'm going to tell you, and I want you to think about what you think. He said the self is not something that one finds, it's something that one creates. And think for a minute about what you think, because I don't actually agree with that. I think self-expression and being ourself is our ability to just be, right? Like, we don't have to create anything. Being you is simply being you. And when we extend compassion to our own hearts by creating and receiving it from the world around us, we have more allowance inside of ourselves to truly be who we are. I hope that you see that through these examples that I've given you about cultivating compassion and being completely self-expressed, when you find the connection between the two of them, it gives you more power. Okay, I hope you're loving the new format for this short season, season 2. If you loved this episode, if you think others can benefit from it, you know I would love it if you share it. If you have any comments or anything that you want to say, if you feel like you had questions still from the first season, we are revisiting that story and it's continuing, right? Because you'll see that Jake's story then lines up with our story and it's all the same story, right? All meshed together. So if you have questions, you can email them to hello@myfriendmisha.com, or you can DM me on Instagram, questions, comments, or anything. I always just welcome and love hearing from you. My listeners are honestly the best. I love even running into you, hugging you. I love knowing that you're listening. So anyway, you guys are just really the best. You're the reason I do the podcast, obviously, and it just makes it all so worth it that you're enjoying this story. Okay, remember that it is very, very helpful if you subscribe, rate, review the podcast. So helpful for me. And also, if you are getting ready for anything that you're doing this summer or Easter or whatever you have going, if you want to give back to the podcast, you can do that by shopping my affiliate link. So instead of just typing Amazon.com, type Amazon.com/shop/myfriendmisha. And that basically, whatever you buy, it just gives a kickback to the company so that we can continue to bring you all the content that we do and all the things that we're up to. Like, I have so many things up my sleeves. I think, like almost every day I'm like, let's do this. Let's do something else. I'm excited to possibly think about offering different types of meditations and more classes on heart coherence. And there's a lot bursting out of my chest. And if there's something in particular that you would love, I would also just love to hear from you about that. Thank you so much for being with us today. You know it means a lot to me that you make me a part of your journey. And today I want to leave you with a thought from Abraham Hicks. And she says that ultimate worthiness is getting to a place where you like yourself so much that it no longer matters to you how other people feel about you. And when you really feel that free, when you really feel that worthy, you are delicious to be with. Until next time, my friends.